latest Haven Tuesdays at 2. My name is Brad Pierce, on staff with Haven, and want to personally welcome Mary Stonacek to our presentation today. Mary is the Territory Manager for Left Bank Arts, one of our go-to sources for wholesale arts at Haven. So Denise, if we can start the slideshow. Give a second to get that set up here.
There we go.
So today we are this is just an overview of our time here today. We're going to talk a bit about artwork sizing and some of the display options for art. We're going to touch on design styles and how it relates to some of Left Bank's art. And then specifically, Mary is going to highlight some of Left Bank art's background, some of its substates, customization, and artists. And lastly, we'll do a quick kind of artwork hanging 101. So we go to the next slide.
Great. Well, let me jump in. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Brad, for having me. It's always a pleasure to work with you at Haven, and we love being your partner in your art source. So today, just right now, I'm just going to talk about two of our substrates that are recently introduced. And I love this one. It is actually Kozu paper. It's mounted under acrylic glass, which keeps it lightweight for you. But the Kozu paper is rolled and hand torn after it's printed. And it just has a really warm, authentic, one-of-a-kind look. And because they really are torn each time you purchase a piece, it might be slightly different on the amount of tearing that takes place. But this, for our Chicago, of course, customers, they love that global look and that authentic look, as there's so many that are travelers and have wonderful jobs that take them around the world. So I love this piece. I thought it was a great, and it's a collection of 4. And then the next one is very cool. This is actually bubble pop art, and it was designed after our original version of this collection of faces that we do. And it actually has bubble layered over the giclée, and then we go back in, and where you see those bolder placements of color, we actually hand paint in that little bubble. So it's really interesting. It draws you in, it makes you want to look at it, which is really what art is all about, is grabbing your attention and causing a little pause and interest. So that was really a fun one, and it had a great response too.
So we thought we would start there. Stepping back a little bit, want to just talk a little bit about art in general. So here are some of the standard artwork sizes. These relate, for the most part, to the sizing that we use at Haven. You'll see there's a variety of different sizes as spelled out. These are some standard sizes. Again, there's lots of variations on this. At Haven, we really focus on the last 3 categories: medium, large, extra large, in particular, the large and extra large sizes. As we'll talk about in a minute, we feel that artwork is so important, and particularly having it be as big and as much of a focal point as possible. Next, we will talk a bit about the choosing the right artwork size. So there's a couple of factors that you can consider when looking at making a selection for artwork, even before you're making selection to the actual piece itself. First is the room. As I said before, bigger is better from our perspective. We often select art that's too small, or that's that we hang too high, and so it's really important to consider the whole room, particularly the furniture placement as well as the ceiling heights. Next, the wall. is important to consider. This, again, is everything from the dimensions and orientation and finding a piece of art that really fits to the size of the wall and the space itself. It's really important to keep balance in the room, and that might be through offsetting other artwork as well as keeping a similar central height in which you're hanging things. Overall, artwork should be somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the wall space in general. That's, again, is a general recommendation if you're looking to have that artwork be a focal point. Next, the placement itself. There's some different things to keep in mind here in terms of the placement. If you're placing it above a furniture piece, there's some suggested measurements and parameters. In particular for us, it's really important to keep in mind how we're framing the artwork above something like a sofa or a headboard, so that 6 to 12 inches above the top of a furniture piece is something to keep in mind. One thing to speak about is if it's a low ceiling, below 8 feet, if the height is a little bit lower, one suggestion is to break the wall into 4 sections, starting at the bottom being ones. The first section, and it's break the walls, the open wall portion of the wall. So between the top of the sofa and the ceiling, for example, in the lower level, break that into 4 sections, 1 at the bottom, moving upward, and place your art in the third section. That will give you the balance in most cases in that lower space with it still feeling full. Again, a couple of other suggestions as you'll see on the screen with regards to hanging different pieces, both in stairs and above fireplaces to keep in mind. Lastly, there's in terms of kind of keeping in mind of what an ideal width and height might be, this is one formula. There's many different schools of thought in terms of sizing and calculations for that, but this is one formula that you can keep in mind in terms of calculating the ideal width in particular, but it also works as well for height. There's a variety of different ways to display art, which we're all familiar with. Hanging, is the one that we're most familiar with, but there's lots of other ways as well. Leaning is something that at Haven we're doing more and more with, and Mary can speak to that as well. Very much on trend and a really great way to add some interest in a space, and particularly if you're not looking to really make a lot of holes in the wall. So that's something that's a nice way to display art. Next is a gallery space. This is really a nice way to include and highlight several different pieces of art, particularly if it's a larger space where you're wanting to capture a collection of some sort onto a wall. One thing to think about with the gallery space is they can be different sizes, they can be all the same size. One suggestion is to really think about the gallery from left to right. Certainly looking at it from the whole space as an entity, but our eyes move left to right. So if we're going to have anything that's a little bit heavier, if the frames are heavier, or if the colors are darker, one suggestion is to keep those heavier pieces towards the left of the grouping. But whatever the layout that you might select with a gallery setting in particular, using the floor as a way to set up those spaces first will really help you later on when you're going to hang them. Or cutting out paper, or using painter's tape, something that you can position all the artwork on the wall first, on the floor and or onto the wall, so that you know exactly where things are going to go and make sure the scaling and the placement works throughout. And again, there's a lot of online resources for that as well. Lastly, our display shelves and rails. Again, this offers flexibility and a variety of different ways to cultivate a look. And we're seeing a lot, and this is something that the Left Bank does a really great job of doing a variety of different ways where things don't have to be framed. And Mary will speak to this, but if things are unframed, different types of mediums or substrates, that's a really neat, creative way to display artwork as well. I speak a little bit about some of the rules of artwork that you want to keep in mind, large walls for large art, etc. This is from an Architectural Digest article recently that these examples are pulled from. And it just shows that even though we have some rules potentially that we can use, it's also nice to think outside the box sometimes. So you'll see some of these examples here where maybe the space lends itself to having an artwork piece that's off center. In this case, maybe there's a light switch that forces it to be off center, but other times maybe we're trying to add a level of intrigue to the space by having something off center or raised up or crooked, as some of these examples highlight. Next, for those of you that joined us last week in our Tuesdays at 2, our discussion focused in part on design styles. We talked a lot about different design styles and offered a chance for you to even take a test to determine what your design style was. So the next series of slides here are some of those different design styles that we spoke about last week. And these are all specific pieces that are in Left Bank's inventory and are available for purchase. And we've grouped these by some of the different design styles. So you can really see that Left Bank has a tremendous variety of different styles of artwork, both in terms of the mediums and the compositions, colors, and things like that. So we'll scan through these next couple of slides here real quickly, so you can see some of the different styles and the different ways that Left Bank utilizes these in their pieces. Some of these, as you'll see, are pieces that are taken directly from Left Bank's showroom space, in this case from their Vegas showroom.
Very cool. That kind of gives you an idea there. And then that'll let Brad tell you more about hanging.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Mary. So moving from frames and whatnot into hanging itself, just going to touch a little bit here as we conclude on some basics on artwork hanging. There certainly are so many different ways to hang artwork and different schools of thought on hanging, but we've collected just a few ideas here that we would pass along to you. First, here are some of the tools that you'll need. This is a pretty standard list of items, as you can expect, but these are the things that we suggest to have ready as you prepare to hang artwork. One thing I want to call out specifically are the 4-heat hangers. That's a specific brand. They're just a really great hanger. We use these a lot at Haven. Particularly, they work great in plaster. So if you have plaster walls, they go into plaster nicely. Their smaller size nails allow the nails to come out without leaving a big mark in the wall, and they can be reused over and over again. So of the things on the list here, that's the one thing I definitely wanted to highlight. And you'll see that those are, the hangers themselves are important, as are, the surfaces that you're going into. Next, the preparation, again, pretty straightforward, but looking at clearing the wall and the space that you're working in. Oftentimes it's easy to be hanging a piece of artwork, say above a sofa or above a bed, and want to just jump on top of the sofa to hang the artwork. In the end, you'll find that it's going to be easier, and you'll have a better experience and likely hang the piece easier if you can clear all that out of the way. So that would be one suggestion if you're able to do that. And also just get an overall sense of where you want the artwork before you begin the hanging process. Next would be the hanging itself. You'll see that there's, finding the right height is really critical, and this can often be, along with finding the artwork piece itself, determining where to hang it can be a challenge for some. Again, sometimes it's easy to hang a piece too high or too low, and again, really depending on the situation of the space. If it's a lower ceiling or vaulted ceilings, these heights are going to change. But in general, the suggested height that we use at Haven is 60 inches to center. So if, for a standard person, this puts it at eye level. That 60 inches is the center of the artwork piece. So if we go to the next slide, we have 3 different methods that we're going to highlight here today. The first one is the trial and error method, which is really the most the simplest and kind of quickest process. And that really is just taking a piece of artwork and holding it up, estimating where you think it's going to be hung, and placing the artwork up, marking where you think the hook will be, hanging the hook, and then stepping back and taking a look at it. You may need to do that a couple times to get it exactly right, but that's going to be one if you are not wanting to do a lot with calculations or a tape measure, or really just doing something very quickly. That's one method. Haven's method that we use in most cases is a variation of that. It's one that we found works well for hanging quickly, but still accurately. We'll hang a piece of artwork where we feel like it needs to go on the wall, mark the top of the artwork piece. So if you look at the example here to the right, we would put a mark at the top of this piece of art. This particular one measures 2 foot by 3 foot. We would hold it up onto the wall once we've found that center point of the artwork, and if we're using 60 inches as a baseline, and from there measure down the height from where the picture hook is, in this case 3 inches, and that's where we would put our mark and place our hook. So that's one approach. The last approach is what we're calling the math method, which for those of you that love math, this is the one for you. It's really not that much more complicated, but it involves a calculation where you're looking at dividing the artwork into 2 and then taking that ideal height and minusing that distance. So if we go to the next slide, again, we can show this as with an illustration here, where if we're looking at the center height that we're looking at the eye level to be at 60. If we're looking at the example on the left, you'll see that our center of the artwork is 12. So we're going to take that half of that height, which is 12, measure up, and then subtract the 3 inches for the wire. So in essence, really similar to the Haven method, it's just taking that half measurement versus measuring down. Some additional thoughts to keep in mind. There are, if you're hanging artwork side to side or vertical groupings, as Mary had said, there's different ways and approaches to doing that. But in general, you're going to treat a set of artwork or a grouping of artwork much like you would a single piece. But as you're looking at the measurements, you're going to be looking at it as the entire grouping from side to side versus individual. We suggest somewhere between 4 to 6 inches is the sizing between art pieces. And then if a piece does feel particularly heavy, or if you feel like it's artwork is in a space where it's potentially going to shift off level, maybe it's an area where there's high traffic, a hallway, something like that, the double hooks will allow it to stay more level and more in place. And lastly, on the screen, you'll see that there's just a few suggestions in terms of some general thoughts of hanging artwork, things like having someone to help you, most importantly, if you can, and just double checking that you are or are not doing some of the things. So that concludes our time here today. We certainly appreciate your time, and all of us at Haven for sure really extend our thank you to you, Mary, for your time and sharing your expertise with all of us on the call. Does anyone have any questions, or are there anything that came up in the chat that we can address? Mary, do you have anything else to?
I'm so sorry. I was still on mute. I'm sorry. I'm talking, thanking you. Thank you. It was great. No, it was terrific, and I appreciate it.
Well, again, if those of you that are listening, if you do have any questions for myself or for Mary, we'll much like we have in past sessions, we will follow up with this slides as well as the video from this session here today. And again, always reach out to us if you have any questions. We also invite you to join us next week at 2, where we'll be talking about lighting, and we will have someone speaking and sharing with us about lighting trends and lighting 101.
Great. Thank you.
Carrie, thanks so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. All right.